James Bennett, you have over 35 years of sales experience and generated millions of pounds of sales alone during your career. After leaving university with a zoology degree, you started your own business, but you found that sales was your true calling. You have sold advertising in newspapers all the way to software with Oracle. You are now running Pathfinder, a fantastic business where you have the mission to change how people view selling from the stereotypical sleazy salesman to truly empathy-based selling. So thank you for coming in today. It's been fantastic to find the time. This is our third Inspire Initiative interview style podcast, or whatever it is you want to be. I think the first question that we have to ask is, what is empathy-based selling?
Well, thank you very much for inviting me onto this, Ashley, first of all. It's fun. We've had good conversations together. And as you will know, my principle of selling for those who are thinking of getting into it is not to think of it as selling. The simple answer is, if you're thinking of selling, don't. Which is odd, I know. But the thing that matters in all of this is, of course, the person buying. And if we're selling really well, we're helping them buy. And if we're going to help them buy, we need to understand them. There's a very well considered, often repeated view that people will buy from people they like. I don't agree with that. I've bought many times from people I liked, and I regretted it. I should have just properly thought about it and realized that, in fact, people buy from people they trust. And that's the first most important thing about empathy selling, because if we can understand, as sellers, if we can understand the people we would like to sell things to, and if we put ourselves in their shoes, then we can help them buy something that's really valuable to them. And that's really what empathy selling is all about. Because as we do that, we will build a relationship and we will build trust. Now, there's every chance in the world that because they trust us, they'll also like us. And with a bit of luck, we'll trust them and we'll like them. But yes, empathy selling is really all about remembering that people buy from people, and it doesn't matter. B2B is just the same as B2C. Business to business is the same as business to consumer. It is still the human interaction between two people and building trust that is inspired by the buyer in the seller, so that the seller is then trusted to be able to put forward a solution to whatever the problems, the risks, the aspirations might be of the buyer. And that is how it really happens. And it's not pitching. It's not trying to close people hard with time pressures or sleazy amounts off. Leave that to all the marketeers. They're great at it. True sellers build trust. And that's empathy selling.
Amazing. What is the best way to build trust?
Well, it's very straightforward in actual fact. And if we just take it into a kind of human personal thing that pretty much most of us have done, we see somebody we like. Let's hope we're single at the time. And we think, that's kind of keen on them. And we want a first date. We get our first date. Getting a first date ain't so hard. But the thing that is quite entertaining, if we liken it to selling, is on a first date, the way some people would sell would be something along the lines of, lovely to meet you, great, tell me a bit about yourself, then completely ignore all of that, dive straight into dominating the meal. Let's say it's a meal or a drink we've moved on to a meal, dominating the meal with all about themselves and how wonderful they are and all these fantastic things they've done, and they've jumped off cliffs and they've ridden bulls and goodness knows what besides, and they're absolutely fantastic. And they wrap it up. So, aren't I brilliant? Let's get married. You know, but that's actually what some salespeople do, and that's in fact what a lot of people, when you really think about it, a lot of people think that is selling. Of course, it's not. It is about building trust, and over the course of a dinner with a date, what actually happens is a two-way conversation of getting to know one another, getting to find common ground, enjoying one another's company. You know, it's smiles, it's a human relationship. And on both sides, the building of trust is first of all, therefore, about understanding somebody. So trust, that there are two core elements of trust. One is understanding, and that always has to come first. Always has to come first. That it enables us to build the empathy. But then next, when we're selling, it is, okay, so now I trust this person. I need to have the security that they will be able to deliver and deliver what it is that I need. So those are the two pillars of trust-based empathetic selling. It's first of all, really good understanding. And the second, once we have the understanding and know we have the understanding, have the proof that we have the understanding, then it is about the security that we offer when we make our offer for services or products or whatever they are.
Does it depend on what we're selling? So, say we sell services. You know, that's what I decided. They're services based, and then obviously McDonald's, it's a product and a bit of a service. So, product and service based businesses. Would you say that there's a different way of going about it if it's a product or a service, or is it still very similar?
Well, ultimately, the quality of the relationship between provider and customer or client, in its longevity, will always be based on service. It has to be based on service. There's somebody I know who's absolutely lovely fella, and provides an enormous range of product. Great products. They've got all their ISO certificates, all that kind of stuff. But I would love to buy products from them, but the problem is their service is unreliable. Orders get forgotten. Orders miss deadlines. So whilst I might buy products because they're good value, you know, better than the open market, whatever it might be, the problem is price, important as it is, isn't the major thing. What we need is regular, reliable supply. So that regular, reliable supply comes back to service. And the only difference then in the product that is provided by a service business or a tangible asset, physical product business is the nature of the product. On the one hand, it's tangible. On the other hand, it's intangible. It's a concept. It's the sharing of IP, intellectual property. They're fundamentally the same thing. And they all rely on service.
Do you think that all sales should be empathy based? For example, let's say it takes 2 to 3 hours to make a sale using this empathy based selling model. But what you're selling is, we'll say, less than £200. Would you say that there's a better sales method of going out to doing that because it's such a low ticket and it's better for high ticket items, £1,000 plus? What do you think?
Oh, yeah, I would certainly agree that the larger the ticket price, the more important it becomes, for sure. Um, and I think this is demonstrated very simply by what we'll buy online and what we'll buy face to face when it comes to tangible products. No one would think twice of, I want 20 biros, I'll just get them on Amazon or eBay or somewhere. Is there any empathy selling going on there? No, not a lot. But we do trust. In that situation, it's a marketing kind of trust. We trust the brands, but remember, we are still trusting the service because we'll go to them because we can rely on delivery. We know we can rely on delivery. But in terms of empathy selling, does Amazon do any empathy selling on me? No, not really. They've got some clever mechanisms to make it look like they want to know me with suggestions and so forth. But actually, that's just marketing, and that's just get me to buy more stuff. At the other end of the scheme, obviously, the bigger the ticket price, the more empathy needs to be displayed and needs to be genuinely felt by the seller if one's selling, a piece of software or software as a service worth, millions a year, then whoever's buying it needs to know that the person selling absolutely gets them, absolutely understands their issues, what they're trying to achieve, what the risks are. So yeah, there is a big difference, but where the line is drawn, I'm not sure it is necessarily an absolute value. It's the nature of what it is and its importance to the buyer. So buying, in a business, buying a piece of software for 200 quid is kind of neither here nor there. If, on the other hand, it's something personal and it's, let's say a bedside lamp. We go into a shop for a bedside lamp and the price is £200. Now, in my book, 200 quid is quite a lot for a bedside lamp. Now, I'm sure there will be people screaming at me saying, no, that's really not a lot. But so you just call me out of date. But for me, that's a lot. So I'm going to want quite a lot of convincing to buy a £200 bedside lamp. And because I'm going to take quite a lot of convincing, someone's going to have to show me quite a lot of empathy. So empathy selling is really about the value that it has more than the ticket price.
So let's say that we have a £5,000 ticket service or item. At what point would you say in the process of, say, how many hours would you say is the right time to begin thinking about? Now, I know you don't like the word closing. Or when would you...
I love closing. I love closing. I just love closing in a different way that most people think of closing. As you know well,
Yes.
my own personal view of closing is a rethink on the idea. And the reason I think it's worth a rethink is because a lot of people are very uncomfortable with the idea of selling for some of the reasons we've described. They think of it as selling at somebody as opposed to helping somebody buy. But even where we've kind of overcome this, and there's this notion that there's this point where we need to get commitment from somebody to buy, to put pen to paper, sign electronically, make a commitment by email, whatever it might be. There's this kind of pressure build thing. And most people think of selling, most people think of closing as that moment of hitting the pressure point. I think of it slightly differently. And it goes back to some of the training I had, which was something called step closing, where sellers will simply get used to will get their buyers used to saying yes. How does that sound? Does that sound right? Have I understood that right? Yes. Okay. So if we came up with this kind of idea, would that kind of idea be in line with what you're thinking? Yes. Okay. So, and if we were to start, what kind of start would it be? You mentioned March, maybe early April. Which would be better of the two? April, maybe? Yes. You see what I mean? They're all closes. They are all closes. I've done several different types of close there. They're all closing. They don't fit there, but they don't have that pressure point, right? They don't have that pressure close. I'm not saying, okay, then when would you like to go ahead and how would you like to go ahead, sir? Or the rather cheesy, would you like it in red or would you like it in blue, the alternative close. Closing is built up into this crazy thing. So there's I believe it's in a very entertaining sales film called Glengarry Glen Ross, where this very cheesy sales manager talks about ABC, always be closing, right? I advocate not taking your sales training from films, by the way. They're kind of designed to give examples of what not to do. But that aside, that happens to be true. It's absolutely fine to keep checking, summarizing, validating with buyers as a seller that we understand right, that we're getting it right, that our thinking is right. Are we still kind of on the same page? Am I still thinking the right way? They're all closes, they're all yeses, so that as it were, the final yes of total commitment is the easiest thing in the world for them to say yes to. They're used to saying yes. So closing, in terms of when is the right moment, every moment is the right moment. It just depends on what question you're asking. And that's where we need to be empathetic to be able to read where somebody is in their buying cycle, to know that we can just move them on with the right question that gets a yes to the next bit of the conversation, the next stage in the conversation.
You mentioned that a buying cycle. Now, I know that if you're in a business, buying cycle is something that I think a lot of businesses you'll do the selling cycle, where how can we sell to people? But I'm thinking in terms of a coach and a lot of different coaches which haven't really worked in a business and that they're doing these things for the first time. What is the buying cycle?
Right. Yes, it is the other side of the camp. And we all experience it. We don't necessarily dissect it and think of it in stages, but in practice, in not every, but in most cases, there will be a moment. Sometimes people refer to it, most often people refer to it as a trigger moment, where something happens that makes us think that we need to do something as this person that we're going to become, called a buyer. It might be a mistake we've made. It might be something that we've broken. It might be an unpleasant experience that we had. It might be something we did where we thought, oh, that really, don't really want to do that again. That's the trigger moment. And what it does is it creates a sense in us that there's something that needs to be done. What then happens in the brain, and remember, we are dealing with very complicated things in human brains that involve millions of neurons and a large number of chemicals, some of which are hormones, which are fun. The next thing that happens is we we don't really realize, but subconsciously we start to think about that moment, that trigger moment. And we subconsciously think about how we'd like to not repeat it. And over the course of time, we begin to crystallize the idea of what we want to do to not repeat it. And in a sort of graduated scale from black to white, we go from that kind of pre-contemplation subconscious stage into an active, right, okay, I'm actually going to put a bit of thought, proper thought into it. I'm going to sit down and look at my options. What am I going to do to not repeat that situation? And that's where we are actively contemplating. So yeah, there's first that trigger stage, then there's that pre-contemplation, then there is that contemplation where we are looking at options before we effectively make a decision on what to do. And that decision making is the third stage where we get very logical. Because in that contemplation phase where we're looking at options, it's all quite comfortable, but there's sort of no looming commitment at that point. So it's a very emotionally buying point, contemplation, and an emotional purchase point. But the moment we start to go through the other part of this grayscale into the realization that we're going to need to make a commitment somewhere at some point, we kind of get quite logical. And we start looking for ways to justify what we've emotionally already decided that we want to do. And we end up with this little mini conflict in ourselves. You know, there's a devil on one shoulder, there's an angel on the other, and we have an argument with ourselves about, it's quite a lot of money, yes, but, or that's really cheap, what's wrong with it? You know, all these kind of conversations we have, they are logical versus emotional. And this is the decision-making point where we are looking to come to a resolution. We are looking to make a commitment to ourselves and maybe to others that we're going to do something. And of course, we're committing our time, we're committing ourselves, and we're committing our money to whatever that answer is. And that's the decision point. And then once we've done that, we take action. So those are the four stages: pre-contemplation, contemplation, decision-making effectively, and then taking action. Contemplation stage is emotional, pre-contemplation is subconscious, and that decision-making point is logical and justificational.
Interesting. I think a lot of people probably haven't ever heard the buying cycle in that way. I can remember when...
It's funny, isn't it? Because we all have it. The moment you think about going out to buy a house, buy a car, buy any significant item, if you think back on it, those are the stages we go through.
I think having heard that, because we've spoken about it quite a lot. We spoke about the buying cycle, we've spoke about what goes into it, and especially the techniques and the skills which go into each section. For example, aspirin, which I know I'd never heard of. What does aspirin mean, James?
Aspirin. Well, you'd never heard of it until we'd spoken, because I just came up with it one sunny day. It started, there's a very 20-year-old questioning technique. I think a company called Huthwaite came up with it, but Huthwaite, please don't sue me or anybody else who came up with it. That's just my guess. Which was SPIN, which stood for situation, pain, implication, need. So as a seller, back in the day, we were taught to ask questions about a prospect, a client, a potential buyer's current situation. What's your current situation? What does it look like? What's the current state? Okay. Next, the P. So there are pains involved in in this at the moment. There are problems. What are they? Let me understand your problems is a kind of old hackneyed phrase from cheesy salesmen in the 1980s and early 90s. The better sellers then went on to explore that more. What are the implications of those problems on you, on the business? And therefore, this is what needs to be done about it. N. So spin, situation, problem, implication, need. That's great. Unfortunately, in the modern day, it's pretty clear that we're not, it's going to sound a bit odd this, and what a surprise, it's countercultural as usual for me. My assertion is that we are not motivated actually just to fix problems. And the example I use is, and you've heard it, so sorry for boring you, Ashley, but
Me at all.
for others still with us, I have a problem with my downstairs loo. No, it's not really nasty one, don't worry. It's that the valve is a bit dodgy. So you pull the chain, you release it, it starts filling up with water, but the water valve makes quite a loud noise because it's slightly loose, or something's wrong with it. Maybe it rattles, and then sometimes quite a lot of the pipe work around the house starts to rattle as well. So if you've been to the loo in the downstairs loo, you kind of advertise the fact with quite a lot of noise afterwards. It's a real problem, and it's it's a problem. I know I need to fix it, but for about, I don't know, I've lost track with lockdown. I've been down here, I think, nearly 3 months. So we're up to about month 8, month 9. I'm actually, sorry to say, not very motivated to fix that problem because I have many other bigger problems to fix. On the other hand, if we had loads of visitors round and it became really embarrassing, there would be a risk associated with my problem, which would be embarrassment. I would be at risk of being repeatedly embarrassed, and even worse, embarrassing my guests. So that's a risk from this problem. If equally, at some point, it's the last area to redecorate actually in the house, the downstairs hall and the cloakroom would be the posh word for it. If I was at home, had the time, I would redecorate the downstairs hall and the cloakroom. And guess what? I'd fix the problem because I have this aspiration of a beautiful reception area for our guests as they walk into the house and maybe want to quickly nip into the posh, silent at that point, cloakroom when they arrive. So I am actually motivated in that situation to fix the problem only to avert the risk or achieve the aspiration. And that's why I took spin and thought there's a couple of letters missing off this. There's an R missing for risks, and there's an A missing for aspiration. Because what's ended up, although it was situation pain originally, implication need, in fact, it's ended up with situation problem implication need, and we're missing the very two things that motivate people. So when we're questioning, we need to understand with implication questioning what those motivations are, what the risks are that need to be averted, what the aspirations are that need to be, that people want to achieve. And that's why I just added R and A. I started honestly with sprain. But then when I started working through it, I realized that when we tell stories or when we are questioning, it works better as aspirin, because then we are asking people what their aspirations are. Fine, let me understand the current situation. What are the problems with those? What are the risks that those generate? What are the implications of all of that for you on the business? And indeed, what are the implications of not changing the situation? And then we get onto the needs. So that's where aspirin came from. And the questioning style works rather nicely. Either in questioning, or in summarizing what we found out, or indeed telling stories when we want to make proposals or presentations.
As a coach, and you do a lot of leadership and a lot of coaching yourself to train people in this way of selling, and I'm sure you agree with me, the importance of high quality questions. What would you say makes a high quality question? Is it a question that elicits an emotional response, a logical response? You know, what makes a high quality question?
Okay, yes. After understanding the idea of buying cycle and understanding that we as sellers need to figure out where people are in their buying cycle, then we're prepped to be able to ask the right questions that are going to help our buyers move through their buying cycle. So yeah, the questions are quite complicated things, and they need thought, and they need care, and they need work. So first of all, the question needs to be appropriate for the point that somebody is in their buying cycle, and the question needs to be something that elicits an understanding for us where they are in their buying cycle. So there's a range of different questions, but there are two, three, I guess, universals when questioning. The first is preparation. I've intimated in that just a moment ago. So what are the right questions for this point that somebody is at, both to help them through their cycle, because a question will make them think, and elicit from them what I need to understand with what they are so that I can help them. That needs preparation. Other things that need preparation for the question is the background to it. So if we're asking a question about, you know, what's the current situation with your business, we look, frankly, bloody stupid and nowhere near empathetic if they say, do you mean the company results? Now, if we were to say yes to that, when the company results are there for all to see in the public domain, we are just not going to look like we care a great deal. So the important thing before questions is to research. So to research who we are talking to research the business, if it's a B2B, the business that they are operating in. So preparation is crucial to coming up with the right questions, and that preparation, both of what we can find out, but also consideration of where they are in their buying cycle. The next is to put a question nice and simply. In all my years and sitting in on thousands of sales calls, possibly the biggest single mistake I've seen made is salespeople asking two questions in one. It happens over and over again. Don't ask two questions in one. Just ask one simple question. Another big mistake, which is always fun to watch, is salespeople asking the question and then answering it for their prospect. That's brilliant, as though to show off the preparation they've done. It's hysterical, absolutely hysterical. People do it over and over. Not just salespeople, everyone. So those are definitely two things to guard against, but it's why we need to ask a simple question. So first, prepare. Second, ask a simple question. And the third is shut up and let your prospect answer.
I'd say the most important thing there is shut up. Let the prospect answer, because again, I know that you are a sales coach, that you coach people in this way of selling. You know, if we were as coaches and we just never shut up. And then we asked someone, "I said, how was your day?" "Oh, well, my day's been really, really good." And you
Oh,
wouldn't you wouldn't get
shoot me.
yeah you wouldn't get anywhere. So it sometimes makes me wonder, why do people buy from poor salespeople? What is it? Is it low self-esteem? Is that feeling of this is the way it is? Or is it that, this is the way it always has been? Why do people buy from poor salespeople?
Well, they do. Obviously, they don't buy as much as they would from good salespeople. Um, and I'm sorry to have to say it, but there are a lot more poor salespeople in the world than there are good salespeople in the world. And because they've had their head filled with all of these techniques of making people do things as opposed to helping them buy. There's no question, I'm definitely swimming against the tide on this one. It's a bit like, back in the day, VHS and Betamax fight. VHS, in the days of tapes, you might just have some antiques as you see them in the attic from your grandmother. VHS for many were the inferior kind of tape, but they just screamed loudly enough and got their way. And it's amazing how much poor selling still gets results because of vast amounts of money spent on flash marketing, cheesy offers, and things of that nature. But brands that we really trust, businesses that we really trust and admire, and will pay a premium for as a result, will come from the result of good selling, which is reflecting empathy, trust, which starts with questions. So yeah, I'd say people end up buying from poor salespeople partly because there can be large amounts of money behind it, or quite a lot of poor selling is high pressure. It's high pressure kind of stuff, and it's in the human nature that we don't really want to say no to people. It's a core part of the mindset of the social apes, of which of course we are a member, even though we sometimes forget we are social apes, just like gorillas, just like orangutans. No is not really a socially acceptable answer. We all know this deep down in our core, so we don't like giving it. It takes strength to say no. It's easy to say yes, and that's why poor salespeople get away with making sales that they honestly don't deserve to make, because they pressurize people to a point where they don't have the strength to say no. Is it poor self-esteem? Yeah, definitely in some cases. But I've seen plenty of other people who have perfectly high self-esteem still say yes when they should have said no.
Interesting. In terms of these poor salespeople, why do you think they got into selling? Do you think it was the money? And how, I mean, in your experience, how often do you see them stay for? Do they take it? Do they slog it out for the commission they get? Or do they leave because they don't like it? Or
Yeah. The trouble with professional sales, to some extent, or I mean, it's a blessing, but it's also a trouble, is there's that. It's the same kind of psychology as the lottery, to some extent. There is that notion of hitting the jackpot one day. There is the sight of a nice big fat commission check. It's very alluring. And relatively speaking, it is ridiculously well paid. I mean, it's unreasonably well paid, honestly.
What
When you
figures?
consider,
What figures are we
sorry.
talking? What figures are we talking? What's ridiculously well paid?
Oh, I've known plenty of salespeople with £1 million commission checks, just the commission checks on top of their salary. Um, it generally wasn't publicised greatly. One famous individual publicised it on a panorama program just as I was about to join a company, and it wasn't very popular for advertising the fact that he'd just received a £500,000 commission check. It's kind of not done because it's, I mean, particularly at the moment, and right now creates a great contrast. The people doing great good in this world are, of course, health staff, care workers, and the essential workers keeping our countries going. And the notion, frankly, that salespeople who are doing little or nothing to help society get through this horrific ordeal could be getting great big fat checks for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times what these individuals are doing, who are saving lives and experiencing genuine, significant mental stress. It's kind of obscene. So it is the money. It is the money, and you don't have to go through years and years of training as you do for a nurse, where you then earn a pittance by comparison with the salespeople. So it's easy entry, and once you've had it, you start overcommitting. You get the big mortgage, you get the flash car, you go on the expensive holidays. If you're really doing well, your children start to go to private education, which is a really big fat commission check, and so on and so forth. And you get drawn in, and you, like I say, it's like an addiction. You get drawn in, and to break out into a job where you have to have real qualifications and get paid less, you're kind of stuck, frankly. It's a one-way ticket to commitment. Once you have kind of seen the gold, but you probably only need to see the gold once, twice, or 3 times before it ends up. And there was a wonderful expression. I had a boss who, for obvious reasons, I can't name, but let's say he was very Texan. When I first met him, he literally, in the office, he had the full-blown Texan hat. He had the big cowboy boots. He had quite a lot of the metalwork around the cowboy boots for the spurs. Thankfully, he wasn't wearing spurs. He had the Ukrainian tie around his. I mean, he was Texan through and through, even though in fact he wasn't actually born Texan. But that aside, and he had a wonderful expression, which I remember to this day, and it's about poor salespeople. And he said, "Well, James, even turkeys fly in a hurricane." It's astonishing, and especially in the world of tech. New tech arrives, it's a game changer, as people love to call it. It is spectacular, it's astonishing, it's a brilliant product. It produces phenomenal benefit that hasn't been seen before. In that situation, you just don't have to be a very good salesperson in order to sell it. You can indeed be a turkey. And there's a lot of salespeople who are, quite frankly, turkeys in hurricanes. The ones who are just in calm weather, that's where the real metal is tested. And that's where, right now, if you're trying to sell basic financial technology to businesses, that's a hard sell. You're going to have to be damn good to make any sales in the current climate, just selling financial management software or ERP. So it depends on the situation as well.
Something that you mentioned earlier was about um, different kinds of marketing and selling. Now, it wasn't until quite a few months ago that I realised there was a difference, because a lot of people go marketing sounds the same thing, but I know it's not. So, from a very experienced salesperson, what is the difference between marketing and selling and sales?
It's very simple. Marketing is telling, and selling isn't. Selling is a conversation. It's not about telling. It's about a human to human relationship. Marketing is the shop front. And we only have to think about shops. I mean, well, if we can remember going into shops.
What are they?
And high streets and these things which are now beginning, I mean, in this weird dystopian world, what used to be normal feels weird now. But anyway, let's pretend we're walking down a high street, lovely, normal high street, and there's some shops on either side, and there are shop fronts, window displays. We're attracted to each shop, obviously based on some of the core things that we think we want to buy. But if there are 3 shops alongside one another, I don't know about you, but I know plenty, and I'm not going to say who, I know plenty who will want to go into each shop. I don't want to do that, because shopping for me is an experience that I like to be nice and precise, go out, get what I want, and get back home again. So I will tend to look at the 3 shop fronts, say, side by side, and think, which looks the most attractive? And the most attractive is going to be a lot to do with window display. There'll be subconscious things like colors and fonts used on the display panel at the bottom. That's marketing. That's fundamentally marketing. It is telling us what the shop does. Then I open the door. That marketing has brought me to the door by telling me about itself. And then I open the door and I go in and I have a conversation with the shop assistant, in the retail world, increasingly referred to as buyer's helpers. And then I have a conversation, and they are selling to me, because I'm having a conversation now about what I want to achieve, problems are, what I think I want to buy, and we're having this interactive conversation. And that's the 2. It's the shop front versus talking to the assistant.
Interesting. So I suppose it is the type of communication, that you have with the person, which dictates if it's marketing or selling.
Yeah, if it's just a telling thing, one-way communication, then it's marketing. It's a 2-way conversation with questions and answers and clarification that takes somebody from the point of some degree of interest through to making a commitment to purchase. That's selling.
Fantastic. So something which I mentioned during the introduction is about Pathfinder. And I know that you have your own personal mission of trying to change the UK, at least, that the UK's perception on selling and what it is and what it can do for people. How you aren't selling, you're helping someone to buy. And I know what we do is that we help people buy their dreams, get them close to what it is they do. So what is it that could help you in terms of getting out your message?
I think it's more than anything else. I would ask anyone to forget what they think selling already is, and be open-minded to think that, in fact, it can be one of the most virtuous of professions. as opposed to one that is reviled and vilified to a large extent. It's just be open-minded about what selling really can be. And next is end up in a conversation with somebody who really knows what selling is, as opposed to somebody who says they're great at selling. Because a great seller will have a purpose, will have a mission to help people buy things. They just will. I am a believer that there's a great salesperson inside almost everybody, which is funny because when you ask most people, many entrepreneurs, many business leaders, they'll say something along the lines of, no, don't sell, don't really think about selling, you know, we just, people take orders and we deliver. Or some people will say, yeah, no, I run my own business. I'm not a salesperson. All of which just makes me smile. Because if we're running a business, we all need to sell. It's just that because of the association of the word, we don't want to be tarred with the brush. But if I said to people, would you like to help more customers buy from you? It'd be fine. Absolutely fine. So when you flip it around the other way, you know, I would just invite everybody to have a go at just flipping it round the other way. Think about it just differently. Park all of the kind of hoo-ha and books and tons of stuff, which is all about making people do things, brackets, against their will, into genuinely helping people buy. And some of the best, frankly, some of the best salespeople that I've encountered lately have realized that if they stop doing what they think selling is and are just genuinely themselves and are realizing their purpose to help people achieve things, then all is revealed. And suddenly this discomfort with the idea of selling has gone, totally gone, goes in a blink. So those with purpose, those with virtuous purpose especially, and those with ambition that fulfills that purpose to help people, their clients, achieve things, will be great sellers. It's just that, yeah, there's a few techniques behind it, but actually it's not as complicated as most people think.
Would you say that selling is a numbers game? That it's about finding the right person at the right time, or is there more to it?
Well, yeah, there's another little expression from years in professional sales about, you know, about successful sales individuals requiring three things: talent, timing, and luck. And I've been asked many times, you know, out of the three, which would you prefer? And I just said, well, I'll just go for luck. Because it's amazing how often luck plays a part. It gets tied up with timing. And then there's the old Tiger Woods expression of I make my own luck. Because I keep practicing, I keep refining, I keep improving, I keep doing the right things, and I keep improving those. And that way I make my own luck. It's a bit trite, but it's where it comes back to really, I would suggest, a good business plan, in fact. Clear purpose of what one wants to do, what one wants to achieve as a business, clarity in what that will mean for other people, what it'll achieve for other people, what it can achieve for other people, and who those people are. And then one simply needs to be methodical in identifying those people and trying to build relationships with them to see if indeed your thinking was correct originally and what you have is indeed something that can help change their business or even change their lives. And that's just hard work. That is just simple hard work. So there's talent, timing, and luck, sure, but it's all underpinned by hard work and good method.
What do you think you should do if, let's say, you're 2 months in and you've made this product or service, and you 100% believe in this product or service, and that you know the kind of people that you want to speak to. Let's use me as an example, because the kind of people I like talking to the most are already successful at what they do.
Yeah.
So it's always quite a hard sell for me to try and convince successful people that they need a product or service, well, I will say service, when they're already successful at a given thing. Now, I'm a manager, okay? But let's say that I'm 3 months in. I'm not 3 months in, but let's say I'm 3 months in. And I realise, oh my God, maybe my product or service isn't working to what people really need. What is the best thing for me to do? Is it to repackage? Is it to completely change or spend more time on research and development? Or what is the best thing for me to do in that situation?
Well, this is one area where marketing and sales overlaps, but it gets called marketing research. In reality, we can think in our own bubble, our own context, that we've come up with the most brilliant idea in the world. Clive Sinclair came up with a brilliant idea in the 80s. It was called the C5. It was absolutely brilliant. It was a tiny little electric car, absolutely fantastic. Nobody bought it. It was a solution without a problem. So whilst I say that people aren't motivated by problems, they're motivated by risks and aspirations. Services, products, in many cases, and predominantly in ours, do need to fix problems. The problem you fix is helping people get through a particular barrier to make a breakthrough. They're already successful. How do they get to the next stage? And it's very difficult to figure it out in your own head. You need somebody to bounce ideas across. You need somebody asking you difficult questions that challenge your thoughts, challenge your assumptions, slay a few sacred cows, all of that kind of stuff. Now that's what business coaching can achieve. In my case, the problem fundamentally that I fix is people who are not converting enough of their leads and referrals into pounds in their business, because that's the selling phase. Now, if they're, in your case, where you encounter an individual who doesn't need to break into the next phase, isn't particularly challenged, they're perfectly happy with where they are. Bottom line is they don't need you. And if there is a world full of those people, you've got a great solution with no problem to fix. And equally, if everybody that I spoke to said, yep, we are converting 100% of our leads and our referrals into real business, and we're keeping our clients forever, then I have a solution with no problem to solve. So we only get to help people avert risks and achieve aspirations by fixing the underlying problems. So there does have to be problems. And I think there is always the opportunity, the advantage of this is the advantage of the empathy approach, the trust first kind of approach, the building the relationship on questions, because it gives us the opportunity to constantly ask open questions to see if we could be missing a trick. Am I expressing something in a way that actually is missing the mark? Am I missing some services that I could provide that I'd never even thought of? Loads of people are doing that right now because they're asking questions of their clients, their customers, their prospects. They are realizing there are things they can offer to those people that they'd never even thought of before. And suddenly there are some businesses going, we're going this way, and suddenly they're heading off there. And, you know, the fancy word is they're pivoting. That's what's happening. It's because they're listening to their market. So we always have to listen. So in answer to your question, what do you do if it's not taking? The answer is listen, ask more questions, listen more, find out what it is that people, what problems it is that people need to fix, and go fix them.
Interesting. So it's always pivoting. It's always looking at your market and maybe even your next market and your next audience and thinking about where that's going to take you and where that can be.
Yeah, because that then is the provision of a service, a solution that reflects an understanding of the person or the people that we're dealing with. You know, the first pillar of trust, understanding. It can contrast though, and this is where it's, you know, there is no magic formula to all of this, because on the other side, as I said, once that trust is built, then we need to provide some security, which is reliability of delivery. Now, often in providing services, that means I have a magic formula. I have a magic code. With all my experience, I've boiled all this down into but. You know, I've done it to an extent with the buying cycle. I've done it to an extent with aspirin, and so on and so forth. But those core components need to be flexible enough so that they are adaptable to each and every client, so that what we actually provide on the ground is something that is very specific and very personal to each individual that we talk to. Because otherwise, frankly, and you've been on these things and I've been on these things, I went on about 5 of them last week on big, great big, I can convert your thing 4 times, 10 times, come on this free seminar and I give away all my secrets. It's, you know, here's the code. It's a bunch of letters or it's a bunch of numbers or something, some very clever formula. And it's honestly, it's snake oil. It really is. Most of these things are, in fact, just marketing events with someone selling, and they're thinly veiled with a magic code. And I don't know. I tend to leave these things feeling slightly dirty. I feel like I rather want to shower, but because it doesn't get to me, it doesn't get to what I need. And it doesn't help apply this thing to me. Because back to what we were talking about, you know, people buy from people, and it's always a very personal thing. We have our own personal buying cycles. We have our own personal needs, aspirations, risks, problems, and so forth. So yeah, it's constant change, and then effectively repackaging every time to to each person that we sell to good, solid, reliable component parts.
So something which I know I've certainly looked at quite often is the use of NLP during selling.
Well,
How important would you say NLP is, and do you use it yourself? You know, have you read into it? What do you know of it? And
NLP, yeah, good old neuro-linguistic programming. It's yeah, probably the greatest artist of NLP I think I've come across, not usually thought of as NLP, but is in fact NLP, is Darren Brown.
yes, Darren Brown,
Good old.
phenomenal.
Uh, quick story, I'm a big fan. I find him very entertaining, absolutely brilliant. And of course, as we know, he's not reading other people's thoughts. He is planting thoughts into people's heads very cleverly. Big fan, fascinated in how he does it. He's absolutely extraordinary at it. And so my wife, for my birthday a few years ago, got us tickets, and we went along and sat in the front row of his show in the Hippodrome in Birmingham. He's utterly brilliant at it. What is it? What is it in the real world? And is it relevant for selling? I honestly see it as positive language that makes people enjoy the conversation, feel positive, feel inspired, feel confident in taking action, and therefore it's all positive. I heard one little brilliant trick the other day. No, not the other day, about a year ago, from a fellow who came back from the States and been in one of these sessions. And what he said when he came back was, all those times when a client says something which you disagree with, and it happens, let's face it, quite often, instead of saying, but what about this, change the word but for and. So you say that, don't entirely agree. And what then do you think about this idea? That is NLP. It goes from being a negative thing into being a, I listen to you, I don't happen to agree, and now let's talk about this alternative. And it's good, but like a lot of these things, one can get a little bit over enthusiastic with it. I think take it as positive language to help motivate people to take action to achieve what they want to achieve, and it's good. Quick read of an NLP book, good one. Why not?
Fantastic. What would be the biggest takeaway that you'd want people to have from this? What would be the one thing that you'd want people to take away from it and really apply to themselves in their way of selling?
I would. There are two, I would say. The first is, if you think you're good at selling, clear your mind for a moment and ask yourself why you think you're good at selling. And if you're good at selling because it's just the results you get, have another think about how much better you might be if you looked at it a little deeper and maybe started thinking of helping people buy rather than just making people buy. That would be my first thought for that group. And for those who really can't stand the idea of selling or be called salespeople or anything like that, my message would be that probably makes you the best salespeople there is, because you don't like the kind of selling that is ghastly. There are many people in one of my network groups who are absolutely passionate. They are passionate about what they do. Their purpose is super clear. They deeply care in the quality of the work they do. And they deeply care that what they provide is something that delivers at least what is expected, but preferably beyond. And all they try and do when they're talking to prospective customers is all they try and do is understand. And then in practice, they give examples of other work they've done that they think might be similar, that it's going to be a great talking topic. That is great selling. But if you ask them, do you think you're a good salesperson? They'll say, no, I'm not a salesperson. But they're brilliant. And there are hundreds of thousands of brilliant salespeople who either don't know they are and don't know why, and therefore don't know how to replicate it, or don't know that they are and really just can't stand the idea. And a large number of them will say that they're crap at selling, which I find hysterical. Like this lady I'm coaching at the moment, she's brilliant. She is naturally brilliant, but she confused herself by thinking she ought to do something else called selling. And that's why I say what I said right at the beginning, which is if you're thinking of selling, don't.
Fantastic. Thank you for today, James. It's been a real pleasure. And I'm sure lots of other people are going to really enjoy what you've said, really think about what you've said as well, especially salespeople. I bet quite a few salespeople might look at you as a bit of someone who's going to stir the pot a little bit and to see what happens.
Bit of a maverick, maybe.
Yeah, I'm sure it's going to be interesting. So yeah, thank you for today.